Our stories are brilliant. We are resilient. Our stories are brilliant. We are resilient.
Welcome back to Your Voice Matters Resilient with Jen Chambers. I'm Jen, and I'm so glad you're here. We're in the middle of our special 4-part series called How to Tell Your Story, where I'm walking you through the process of writing and sharing your personal story of resilience. Last week, we talked about finding your story, how to uncover the moments that shaped you, how to spotlight the things that really identify your message, and we were starting to put words to your experiences. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I recommend going back and giving it a try. Today, we're going to move on to shaping your story. How to take your personal experience and craft it into a clear, a powerful, and an engaging narrative. I'll also be guiding you through these exercises to help bring your story to life. So let's grab your notebook and settle in, and let's get started. The power of story structure. One of the biggest challenges in writing a personal story is knowing what to include and what to leave out. A lot of us try to tell everything, every detail, every side story, every lesson we learned. And you can think about this. There's a lot of things that you've read that there's just too much, but the most powerful stories are focused. The best way to give your story the focus is to follow the simple story structure. We talked about this a little bit last week, but number 1's the before, or the challenge. What was your life like before the event? What struggle were you facing? Number 2 is the during, or the struggle. What happened? How was the struggle affecting you? What obstacles did you encounter? How did it make you feel? Number 3 is the after, or the transformation. What did you learn? And how did this experience shape who you are today? So we've got the challenge, the struggle, and the transformation. Basically, all stories are made up of those. This structure helps keep your reader or your listener stay engaged, and it helps people be emotionally connected to your story. Let's apply this with an exercise called mapping your journey. So I want you to take the experience that you identified last week, and I want you to break it into these 3 parts. The first thing is the before. Set your scene. Where were you emotionally during this memory? Where were you physically? Where were you mentally? What was your headspace like before this event? Now, the during. What exactly happened? Describe the challenge or turning point in your journey. And after, what changed? What insight, what lesson did you learn, or what strength did you gain afterwards? Now, as we're talking about this, just brainstorm 1 or 2 sentences for each part. Keep it very simple. Your before, your during, and your after. For example, you could say before, I used to push myself past my limits. I used to believe that slowing down meant to fail. During could be when I was diagnosed with my autoimmune disease, I ignored the signs until my body shut down and stopped working. And after could be I had to relearn how to listen to my body. I had to learn how to set boundaries. I had to learn about the value of rest. So when you have the before, during, and after for your event, you will have the skeleton of your story and the foundation that you can build on. I mean, really, let's think about it. You can apply it to all different kinds of stories. You can think about it even in terms of like Disney stories, or Stephen King is fantastic. He's got incredible details. If you've ever read the story The Body or seen the movie Stand By Me, you can think about the before, the during, and after as it applied to those kids. So now we have the skeleton. So now we have to talk about adding the emotional part and the connection. Now that we've mapped it all out, let's make it more personal. Let's make it powerful. The people who are reading or listening to your story don't just want to know what happened. They want to feel what you felt. They don't want to be told. They want to understand it. That's what makes the story relatable and memorable. One of the best ways that you can do this is using sensory details and emotional details. We're going to do another writing exercise. This is a flashback free write. I want you to pick one key moment from this story that you want to write, the absolute most emotional or transformative part. Now close your eyes and put yourself back in that moment. As you're putting yourself in that moment from your story, the very, very apex of the emotional part of your story, what did the area look like where you were at? What sounds did you hear? What emotions ran through your body? And what small details stand out? I want you to set a timer for 5 minutes and just write about this moment as if you're right there again. Don't analyze, don't edit, just let the words flow. You could say, the doctor's office was so bright. It was so bright, it burned my retinas. The paper on the exam table crinkled as I shifted uncomfortably. My hands felt cold. I heard the clock ticking louder than usual, or maybe that was my heartbeat. When the doctor said the words I knew he would say, I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. I wasn't sure whether I should cry or whether I should sit there still and pretend to be strong. See how that pulls you in? It's a very specific story. It's sensory. It talks about the feelings and the sights and the sounds. And it was emotional. That's how we show a moment rather than telling it. Now, I want you to think about finding the heartbeat of your story. Every personal story has what they call a heartbeat, the emotional core that gives it its meaning. It's not about just what happened, but why it mattered. And again, if you think about the Stephen King story and movie Stand By Me, as an example, ask yourself, what does this story say about me? What truth am I sharing with the world? And what do I want someone to feel after reading this? Maybe your personal story is about finding strength or embracing vulnerability or learning to love yourself. In the example of Stephen King, the child who's the narrator of the story learns it's very much a coming of age story. So what does it say about them? There's a core of boys that go out on a journey to find a dead body, and they're learning how to be adults. They're learning to deal with circumstances beyond their control. They're also sharing truths about what it is to be young and what it is to be on the cusp of learning how to be an adult and how to deal with tragedy. And then what do you think that Stephen King wanted you to feel like after reading or seeing that? He probably wanted you to imagine what it was like to grow up during that time. There's a universal kind of growing upness that is a collective cultural shift that happens when there's usually a moment or two that you can identify when you go from being a teenager or a kid to being an adult. And he very expertly taps into that. So what does your story show? What do you want someone to feel like after they read your experience? Whatever it is, we're trying to weave that message or the heartbeat through your writing. Okay, now I want to do another exercise called an emotional check-in. I want you to go back to that flashback free write and let's underline the moments where you feel the emotions are the strongest. Is there a place where you could go deeper? Are there moments that are too vague, or does something need more detail? Does it sound like your story? Or does it feel too formal or polished, unless that's your style? Just make sure that it sounds like something that you would say. Personal stories should be real. They should be like a conversation. If it feels too forced, try rewriting your story or your section as if you were telling it to a friend. Picture that friend in your mind and have that kind of ease while you're writing. You've done incredible work today. This kind of heart work maps out your story. You've added some emotion and some depth, and you started to shape it into something powerful. So this week, I want you to expand on a 3-part story outline. I want you to flesh out your flashback scene, the one we talked about today, with sensory details. And then I want you to think about what the heartbeat of your story is. What do you want your readers to feel? Do you want them to feel the nostalgia? Maybe the longing for a simpler time, the way that the Stephen King story does? Or do you want in the example of the hospital, do you want to be able to place someone in that room of fear and uncertainty? How do you want your readers to feel? So next week, we're going to dive into something that's called writing with impact, and that's how to refine your words and how to use storytelling techniques to bring your story to life in a way that is resonant. If you're enjoying this series and you want to submit your story to the Woven with Light, Mended with Gold anthology, stay tuned, and I'll share all the details in this week's episode of the podcast, but it's not necessary. It's just fine if you want to do this for yourself. I have to mention it because that's what I have going on right now. But I'm honored that you chose to spend your time with me learning how to tell your story. Until next time, remember, your voice matters and your story matters. And I can't wait to read it. Have a good week.
Sometimes we have to start over. Sometimes we have to fight back. Sometimes it's all too much. Lost inside the black. Our stories are brilliant. We are resilient. Our stories are brilliant. We are resilient. Sometimes we need to lift the voices